Oh, I love that. I love that. I've been working with a concept that basically you go from in the cult, the world cult, or in the trafficking system that we're talking about, you go from a kind of group think, which is the download from the great parasite, which gives its mind to people, so that we end up thinking with its mind. We're not even thinking with our own minds. On some subconscious level, we're interacting with that installation in our minds, but really we haven't found our own voice because we're being controlled at a very fundamental level. And then that group think translates into what I call cult speak, one word. And cult speak can involve the deletion of language or the insertion of confusing language. So if you look at everything that's going on with politics and gender ideology and shaming and everything in the world, it's all designed to basically turn people's what remains of people's ability to think by themselves, just to basically turn it into mush so that they can absolutely be fully controlled.
We talk about it in terms of neurological injury, really overarchingly. There was something, it was in your book. It was in a quote. I recorded something about it. I don't remember where it is right now. There was a paper you were quoting from Richard Allen
Miller.
Miller. I
Yeah,
think
it
it
must
was,
be either embryonic holography or a holographic concept of reality.
there was a specific thing in there that it lit me up when I saw it. I thought there's more about this. It was something about, maybe it was the holography. He was talking about the nervous system connecting everything.
Yes.
And
I have a quote if you would like me to share it so that
oh
people will know
yes,
what we're
that would
talking
be
about.
awesome.
Yeah, it basically says that um, yes, I want to make sure that is the exact quote. So this is in my this is a quote I also include in The World, Cult, and You in the relevant chapter. And he says that the DNA appears to be the projector of a biohologram, both at cellular and organismic levels. And just as an aside, I talk all about this new bogus truther controversy over the existence of DNA and that kind of thing. I go into some detail in this book about that. So if DNA is triggering you right now, just read the book. So this means that DNA is responsible for creating a complex pattern of three-dimensional electromagnetic standing and moving wavefronts in the space that the organism occupies. We believe that these wavefronts interact with, interpenetrate, and interdetermine the physical substance that makes up the creature, us, right? The biohologram has characteristic properties that include the ability to affect the DNA that occupies specific positions within the biohologram. In such a situation, the nervous system constitutes, first and foremost, a coordination mechanism that integrates DNA projections all across all of the cells in the biohologram, aligning these cellular holograms and linking the whole creature hologram. So when you basically fritz the neurology, you are separating the creature from its mind. And I think that's fundamentally what's happening to begin with. Early on, as we are acculturated, as we're brought into the culture, the great parasite is giving us its mind as we learn how to be a member of society. That's what indoctrination really is. We are given a mind to think with, and it's not our own.
It's been so exciting for me to discover the ways that you refer to this stuff, because not only do you describe it in from your perspective, your ways of understanding it, but you also make lots of really good references to other people's research. You organize the way you communicate about it in a way that is very, it's straightforward, it's organized, it's been possible for me to follow even in states of really severe neurological injury. And this is just one of a bunch of different things where in the network we started comparing notes as the most severely disabled people abandoned by everyone. No health professionals knew how to help us or wanted to talk to us. We were just being left for dead over and over and over and over again. We built infrastructure to start to compare notes, and we started discovering things based on our ability to compare notes about our situations where people like us don't get heard from at all otherwise. And one of those things was how extensively neurological injury specifically has been and is being deployed to cause all of these different problems that essentially make people vulnerable to trafficker programming, so that they would keep the trafficking pathways active without even knowing the traffickers were there.
Yes, I agree completely. It's I mean, if you extract your own emotional response or your own, triggered state of being around this topic, just hats off to the great parasite. We're talking about an absolutely brilliant criminal mastermind here that somehow we are partially at least responsible for creating to run this classroom. And it's a great actor in addition to its wonderful sort of spy genius to be able to pull all this off, and the ultimate manipulator of human perception and behavior.
And also a wonderful teacher.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Well,
it's
one
it
of
can
the
be
memes
terrible,
in the
but
book is one of the memes in the book shows this big parasite, right? And it says, meet your head teacher or the head teacher of this realm.
I feel a great affection for that teacher. And it can be very difficult to have this kind of conversation when people are suffering in very extreme ways. It is really violent, the stuff that is going on this planet. And there is a place we can come to about it to recognize how much power we are being given because we have the opportunity to process and engage with the solutions in this context. It is massive, the capacity that we have to make beautiful worlds, because we have this evil mastermind teacher in our reality, whatever, doing the marionette things, pulling the strings, flipping the toggles, playing this role, overstating the evilness, right? But once you start to see the overstatedness of the evilness, it actually gets hard to unsee unless you get really, really neurologically injured again, and that it can be hard to hold on to. But the more we anchor it with one another, we can grow back those neurons really fast. Relational neurological repair is a really powerful thing, and it gets harder and harder to forget that there's a greater context here where what we're learning is so much more powerful and magical than any of the forces that separated us from ourselves or one another in the first place. That's huge.
Beautiful too. You said it so well. You're just exactly right as far as I'm concerned. It's and I think what you brought to the table in that and what you just said is incredibly important. It's this idea, and I don't touch on this as much as I should have, that it is the intersection with the what I'm calling the great parasite that provides an almost endless source of energy for you to heal and transform your own life, and possibly beyond that, your own world. And that's what I meant by this loosh, this this loosh meter. Is it coming to you or from you? Either way, it can move, and if it comes back into you, it can transform right back into chi or prana or mojo, whatever you want to call it. But when it's taken from you, then it debilitates you, and it takes away those things, and it takes away your consciousness, your ability to think. So it's really interacting with the great parasite and the reality construct in a certain way, from a certain mindset or consciousness, where we don't see ourselves as victims, where we see ourselves as making choices, and in making different choices, we can begin to reverse loose the losers. And when you do that, you empower yourself and you disempower them
There,
until they figure out they're being disempowered and they decide to take back their own energy instead of getting it, let's say, from the world cult.
there's this transformative process that we can engage, but it's not just we who have survived challenging circumstances. It's also all of the, I mean, the most the people who are violent predators, people who are trafficking operatives, who are intentionally, knowingly activating harm through these systems. These people, they're not in it because they want to be in it. They're in it because they were in a situation or they were born into it. They've never had a better option. When we activate these kinds of powers of holding ourselves and being centered and grounded in peace and love for ourselves and for one another, belief in ourselves and in one another, we're creating circumstances where traffickers decide not to be traffickers anymore. And
Well,
that's not
you're
just
also
humans.
sketching where you can create something that doesn't turn into a cult. It's brilliant what you're saying. You're also kind of laying out the framework for how one could come together with friends and other people in groups and not have it transform into a cult.
Well, that's what we've been really studying in the intuitive network, because severely disabled people end up not even being able to interface with one another unless we have really clear understandings of how to avoid harming one another. Because people who are in terrible, torturous suffering thrash and can really hurt anybody in their vicinity. So the only way that we've been able to interface with one another, to collaborate over these years, is by making sure that if in our space, in our conversation, whatever modalities we're using, we can never, ever, ever allow traffic modalities, traffic patterns to be run. Like, a lot of people will take some of them for granted and be like, well, we don't know another way to do things. In order to survive physically, we had to find another way to do it. And some people brought up in our groups, when you started talking about community, about how, pretty much any community turns from a community with a community leader into a commune with a dictator, or a cult with a dictator, or something like that. And that's what we found to be true. The reason that we've built what we've built is because we didn't find any community that wasn't affected by these cult modalities. We had to build a totally different way of doing it. And at first, I think a lot of people just felt like it could never happen, but I wouldn't be alive if we hadn't done that. There's no way that I would be alive right now on the planet. So we know that it's possible, but wow, do we have to believe in it, and we have to really focus and do it. We have to keep practicing it. And then what we find is traffickers won't bother us, really, because we're not in their reality. And then what happens is traffickers kind of start to get the sense that something else is going on. There might be a better sense of nourishment. And we haven't made it big enough to know what those effects are. Like, we can never know exactly what's happening, but we know it protects us from violence. We know it protects us from perpetrators, because they fugue out and they get confused and they wander off. That kind of
Yeah.
thing happens when we use these modalities.
It's fascinating. I'm going to be sharing this in my little blog that I mentioned about reverse loosing the losers. But it's so on the subject, and I wanted to share this little moment. There's a moment in my novel Snooze where the protagonist, the hero, Max Diver, he's in the other world of dreams trying to save his father who's gotten lost there. And he's Max is spinning off of an earlier childhood moment when he was being bullied very tremendously at school when he was in sixth grade because he was different, and he was nicknamed Woo Woo because he was this different kid with these different abilities, and he gets totally bullied by one of his classmates. And it's so strong that it awakens, the bullying is so intense that it awakens Max's dream body. And when that does, he basically kicks this guy's ass without even knowing what he's doing. All right. And then years later, as he's harnessing his ability to deal with power, essentially, is what the book is about. It's about the siddhis, the siddhis, the Hindu powers that we have within us, the kind of almost like real superpowers that exist. As he's learning to do that, there's a very pivotal moment towards the end of the story where he is in a group of people that are being attacked by these dinosaurs, these flying dinosaurs, as they're trying to escape a certain area in the rescue attempt where his father is concerned. So these people have a very different understanding of what it means to protect themselves, the people in this other world that he's visiting. And they don't use violence, they use peace as a kind of weapon. And they, like, on their ships, they have something called a pacifier, which is an energy device that sends out this energy that basically pacifies the environment, and it takes away discordant thoughts. And essentially, you might say it takes away the mind parasite installation or something like that, just like real power does. When you have real power that you are personally sourcing, that's your power, it's not somebody else's, then it can actually undo the parasitic mind installation, or at least keep it at bay or disable it temporarily, depending on how much power we're talking about. So there's this moment I was going to share where Max is, the dinosaurs are flying in, and they're about to be wiped out by these very powerful beasts, and his friend Karul on the boat is manning the pacifier. Okay, so this is the little description. It's 3 short paragraphs. Carol appeared to spin the ebony pit on top of the white avocado like a ball bearing in his direction. A shimmering beam of energy erupted from the device, making the air dance all around like a heat mirage as it zapped Max with a direct hit. He was ready. Similar to an Aikido master channeling and amplifying his opponent's own energy against him, he absorbed the pacifier's beam, only to project it back outward in a rapidly expanding sphere. The effect was like a peace bomb exploding. Wave upon wave of pacifying energy pulsed to the farthest horizons. Disoriented, the Thunderbirds simply sailed away on the breeze.
I really love that a lot. It's been especially interesting when I have absorbed pieces of that novel. I haven't read it from the beginning to the end, but I've dipped into a lot of different places in it, sort of non-linearly over time. And I started calling myself Max as a response to the situations that I was in where Megan Elizabeth Morris died, and the people around her did not recognize that death. And so I couldn't allow people to call me Megan anymore. It was really painful to have them fail to recognize that death. So the name Max comes from my father's father, my paternal grandfather. When he was a baby, he was named Max, and then later in his life, he was named Mac. And so I took his names, and then I combined them. But reading about your Max in Snooze, well, I mean, mostly listening. I've been listening to the podcast audios that you released most of the time. It has felt like connecting my avatar self with this other avatar self. There's a kind of kinship there that I don't know exactly how to verbalize, but I have really enjoyed, and I love finding out more about that story, because my memories of reading it are very like this and then this and then this, but it's all out of order. So at some point I'm going to need to read it from the beginning to the end, so I get to actually experience it the way you published it.
Over on YouTube and on my Substack, I'm releasing a series of audio visual chapters. So I'm actually creating imagery for the various scenes, and I'm putting it to music, and there's a voiceover. So I've got the first 5 chapters that I published on my YouTube channel, which is Crow Rising, or my Substack, which is soulluckman.substack.com. You can go check
That's
out.
awesome. I
The,
didn't realize you were adding imagery along with the story.
yeah, I'm basically turning it into a kind of like MTV Insta movie.
Dude, I'm so excited to look at those. Thank you for mentioning that.
Well, you inspired that a little bit, Max. It's funny, to hear you talk about Max and your interface with Snooze, because I've just been really keenly aware in our conversations that there there are different ways of healing damaged neurology, and often the most powerful healing effects combine different elements, different registers. So putting music with words and imagery seem to me potentially much more healing than just having the story out there as an audiobook or as text.
I agree. Learning modalities. And another thing would be, if you don't mind me making a suggestion, I don't know if it's even viable, but if you're doing all that work, you might possibly consider releasing DVDs so that people don't have to stream it. Because
Yeah.
you're talking about a fictional or metafictional healing resource. It's a repair resource majorly.
Mm. I hadn't thought about that. That is very interesting. I'll think about it. I'm still using an AI voice for it.
Mhm.
Uh, there's a reason for that. People have all these ideas about AI and all these different, like, people get really triggered by the AI thing. But basically, you can you can create material so much faster using text to voice, and then combining that with footage from different sources. It's so much faster than recording it and trying to line that up with the footage. That is an undertaking, and I don't have the time to do it. It's not that I wouldn't want to do it. It's just that I don't have the time, and I don't want to pay somebody to do it. So that's where I am, and it also gives me an interesting creative outlet to. And I'm using a service called Pictory. It gives me a very interesting creative outlet to take a blog or a story. I'm doing the same thing with The World Cult and You. I'm basically turning it into an audio, what I call an audio video book, and you can just watch it and absorb it. I'm putting the text on the screen as well, so that you don't have to have like bad CC, closed caption with misspelling everything and going all over the place. You can just turn that off and watch my CC if you want to, or just listen to it and not even watch the images. But the images do bring something to it, when you're talking about cults and cult leaders and hypnosis and all this kind of thing. To see imagery that reflects that, I don't know, it drives these concepts in pretty deep.
It's really important to have all of those modalities in play because people can come to understandings and inspirations on that basis in ways they wouldn't be able to otherwise. And I want to say about the using the AI reader, the AI voice, you can release that so much more expediently, and otherwise it's not available to people try to set up the ability to read something with an adaptive piece of software, but it's hard to set up. And so when people start to have trouble reading text, it can be really difficult for them to absorb anything that isn't already made into audio for them. And at least having the AI voice is a huge benefit. If it's not possible for somebody to be reading it at that time, it lets you release it and it can be out there benefiting people instead of not. I think that's really good.
That's right. That's where I'm coming from. I know that it's not perfect. I would say, in terms of naturalness, one being not at all natural and 10 being fully natural, it's probably an 8 or something like
An
that.
eight is
So
not
it's
that bad. That's pretty
not
good.
that bad, because I've also taken the time to go in and troubleshoot areas where the AI voice was tripped up over certain words or phrasings or pronunciations. And so basically it sounds like the words that are being read or through the AI interface, it does actually sound like what I wrote. So that's good.
That's great.
Maybe the emphasis is not always exactly how I would have done it or that kind of thing. And there's can be a little bit of a awkwardness in that occasionally, a lot of times not at all. And the AI voice I'm using for The World Cold and You is a British voice, and it really sounds pretty, it's probably more like a 9. It's really, really close. But with Snooze, I wanted to use an American accent. And so I chose one of the readers, an American male voice for that, and it's not quite as realistic sounding as the British voice I chose for The World Cold and You.
I'm really glad that you're spelunking in all of these different ways of delivering content. It's made it so much more possible for me and others to look at your work. And we're coming from situations that are basically impossible, that nobody thinks it's even worth time considering how to help us make contact with content. And one of the reasons that we've been able to make more contact with yours has been that you're using a bunch of different modalities to communicate. So it's really cool.
It's funny, it's a little circle because, part of your feedback has inspired me to do that. So, it's given me like a reason to do it. Like, oh, somebody actually gives a shit, because I really, a lot of the time, a lot of the time I just feel like no one really gives a shit about what I'm doing. Sometimes I get really, I mean, I get a lot of great feedback, but on the projects that I'm really interested in, like, this new one, The World Cold and You, it's really hard to get people behind the damn paywall to read the book, and I'm not going to give away my content. I'm just not going to do it. This is how I make my living and support my family. So, you have to get behind the paywall, and it costs like $19 for a month. And there's like 1,000 different things back there that you can take advantage of. I mean, it's a world. I call it like a one-man Netflix for conscious creators. So it's a really good interface, and it's just going to get better and bigger. I've got all kinds of projects going on. But it's really difficult sometimes to feel, I think also, my choice of material subject matter is so far outside the mainstream that I am dealing in a very small pool of people who are even enough on this wavelength to attempt to care.
I think there are going to be more and more of those people. I think people are going to, it's already happening. It's not in the future. People are increasingly having to seek refuge in ways of thinking and sensing these kinds of, I don't even know how to say it exactly. People are being squeezed out of what they felt was the normal world, the
Mm-hmm.
apocalypse as a birth process. It's being made very uncomfortable for all of us in there.
Yes, it is.
And I mean, there are different levels of that. Like it might be kind of mild, or it might be really, really bad. And people, what people do is people find out, we found our unique sensory equipment, we found our psychic activations, we found out how interconnected our bodies are even when we're totally physically isolated from one another. We had to find that out because of the life-threatening circumstances, and that squeeze, the cult squeeze of the world right now is resulting in people discovering, oh wow, I need a totally different language to understand what's going on. I need a totally different way of learning. I need a totally more unique and open and diverse way of connecting with other people about subjects that I have been fear-mongered and threatened for wanting to talk about. I'm going to have to find some way into the mystery that we're living in. And there's a lot in your materials that help people to connect with that mystery, not only in terms of being willing to connect with the mystery and having a way of being in contact with the mystery, but you also provide a lot of touch points on the spectrum from like normal mainstreamy sciencey stuff, like research data. There are steps that one can take, and like, here's the mystery, and here's the everyday world where we talk about sciencey data. And like, oh well, here are all these researchers that are actually exploring these different layers of, oh, and there's the mystery, and this is what I've been dealing with, and people didn't believe me, and people wouldn't talk to me about it, but these researchers make sense, and there are a bunch of people doing work on it. So you catalog a lot of that stuff, and that's pretty huge to make stepping stones like that in a world like this at the time we're in.
Yeah, I just felt that to be taken seriously, I appreciate all that, Max. I felt that to be taken seriously, even though I didn't personally need it because I had experienced the mystery and I had experienced energy and the healing power of it and that sort of thing. You know, I didn't feel the need to prove it to myself, but I really realized if I was going to be taken seriously, putting out books about, energetic healing and um, changing our physiology and our consciousness and that sort of thing, that I would have to give some, like a launch pad, like a quote unquote real world launch pad for a lot of people to begin that journey into the unknown. And I've continued to bring in pieces of that, although I really do find that as time goes by, I'm less and less concerned with it. I mean, one of the real realizations that when you get deep into the paradigm that I'm outlining in this new book, it becomes clear that there is absolutely no such thing as science, that science is perception, 100%, and that because reality is perception. And so I realized that, I might as well be reading comic books if I'm inclined to read science, because it's all the same thing, really. We're just creating stories over and over again. And as I say in the World Cult and You, we're born storytellers, and our stories have a way of coming true one way or another, and that's our power. And some would say that's our curse. Until we learn how to master that power that just flows out of us as born spellcasters, then we will create either prisons for ourselves or paradises or somewhere in between. But usually it's pretty extreme, especially, in the apocalypse that we're in right now. So I'm glad that you've picked up on my attempts to create those scientific touchstones. I've also tried to do a kind of multidisciplinary thing, multi-genre approach, where I don't separate fact and fiction. And this, by the same token, they are part of a continuum. So these novels that I'm writing are just as valid in my view as the nonfiction that I've put out. And even the humor, like the Angel's Dictionary, which is the kind of satirical deconstruction of all of this apocalypse that we're in right now, the same thing. It has value in terms of helping one understand what the hell is going on.